Made with Spoken.
Part 1. Silent, the listeners.
It's not working.
Winnie said as she hit the butt of the flashlight against her palm.
Here, let me see it.
Ridley said impatiently. It was 3 a.m. in Fallwater, Nebraska, and Ridley and Winnie were likely the only two souls stirring in the frigid night. Fallwater was a town small enough that the stars were among the few treasured sources of entertainment the whistle-stop suburb had to offer. The town had become one of the few remaining places where one could gaze into the heavens and, with regularity, expect to see stars. Not just any stars. They were brilliant, like the embers of fireworks frozen in time against the pitch of the night. The sky was unencumbered by light pollution, which plagues the larger nearby cities. Tonight was no exception. The stars shimmered gloriously against the deep of the cloaked night, and it seemed silly all at once to Ridley that they even needed the second flashlight. Screwing the back of the flashlight back into place and flipping the switch several times, Ridley said,
I can see just fine. One flashlight is plenty. Besides, ghost hunting is better without flashlights.
Ridley arced the flashlight overhead in a readied position. Winnie was unsure why he looked as though he were trying to heave it as far as he could. This wasn't a farm team tryout.
No!
Yelled Winnie.
Give it here.
Why? It doesn't work.
I know that, dummy, but I want it anyway. It makes me feel safe.
Ridley wrinkled his face in confusion and said,
I thought I made you feel safe.
Winnie shot a sarcastic look in his direction. Reluctantly, though, without argument, Ridley handed Winnie the flashlight, but not before removing the batteries and chucking them into the night. He listened intently for the sound of a smashed window, or perhaps a loud ding as they deflected off something metal. Instead, a disappointing thud as they landed in some weeds would have to suffice.
You're such a boy. You just need to throw something, don't you?
You're welcome. I just made your useless flashlight even lighter. I was being a gentleman,
said Ridley as he popped his proverbial collar.
No, you just ensured that it has zero chance of working.
Winnie snapped back. Both she and Ridley laughed, arguing over such trivial things, as often they did in the spring of their youth. They were in love. They'd known each other since one was walking and the other was talking, Winnie's mother would say. It was their senior year at Wakefield High, and graduation was just a few short weeks away. Unless the local teens were having a party on the abandoned railroad tracks, they would be completely alone and primed for optimal ghost hunting. Ridley and Winnie loved a little adventure, and ghost hunting had become one of their favorite things to do together. Not that there was much else to do in their podunk town. The night was cool and calm. The stars were out in greater numbers than either one of them could recently remember. A pensive unease grew in them as they neared the tracks. It was as if they somehow absorbed the fear and excitement the old rail yard seemed to produce. For these two thrill-seekers, the torch of adventure had been lit. The railway station had been unused for 30 years, but somehow lacked the typical wear of time consistent with human absence. Something about the station seemed magical, especially to the youth of the town. It was a regular spot for teens who'd escaped their parents' watchful eye. In search of something a bit more tantalizing than their four walls could offer, local kids would often throw massive parties or go on group ghost hunts. The rail yard was also rumored to be a place where teens went missing. But just rumors after all, Ridley and Winnie would remind each other.
Here we are, Fallwater train station.
Winnie uttered as they approached the main sign that led into the outdoor waiting area. Ridley glanced at Winnie but did not respond. An eerie sense of dread suddenly foreshadowed their excitement, though neither of them admitted it to one another. Both of them feared that merely speaking it into existence would damage the evening's fun.
I don't remember seeing that.
Ridley said, pointing at something.
What?
Winnie asked.
That?
The building?
No, the name above the door. Corella Center. What the hell is that?
Across the tracks, just beyond the main sign for Fallwater Station, was the station itself. The exterior was built on the foundation of brick, muscle, and the fortitude of the early 1900s, and it stood silently, watching back at them in the autumn air. An island of goosebumps suddenly populated the back of Ridley's neck. The building produced a sort of weight that one felt drawn into, as if it were the center of gravity in the town, silently seducing the children of Fallwater. Of course, the building had always been there, but Ridley was referring to a sign above a seemingly innocuous door to the right of the main entrance. A small floodlight perched above the door illuminated the sign, Corella Center.
That's weird.
Ridley continued, squinting but for no other reason than to illustrate her acknowledgement. Winnie remarked,
No, I think that's always been there, right?
Both Ridley and Winnie fell silent for a long moment, deep in their own thoughts. The tracks seemed to divide their two worlds. The side they stood upon felt safe, known, and unshakable. Comparatively, the other side felt raw, untamed, and was devoid of light. A gift of the night waiting to be unwrapped by the two amateur ghost hunters, should they muster the courage,
No, definitely not.
said Ridley.
I've been here a million times and I've never seen it.
Ooh, spooky. Well, I guess that means we'd better check it out.
Said Winnie, as she grabbed Ridley's flashlight out of his hand and jumped down into the gully of the tracks. For a faint moment, Ridley knew in his heart this was the wrong decision. No, not just the wrong decision, but a terrible one. But his youth robbed him of reason, and unconsciously, and perhaps unthinkingly, he continued.
Hey,
Ridley whispered loudly as he jumped down, following her into the tracks.
careful.
He said, holding Winnie's hand as they stepped over the tracks that ran off into the dark abyss in either direction. Once across, Ridley, as nimbly as an acrobat, vaulted himself up the 4-foot barrier.
You realize we could have just walked across.
Ridley said while holding his hand out to help Winnie up. Just 30 yards east of them, a walkway connected the town to the rail station.
Where's the fun in that? We're out here for adventure, right?
Winnie whispered back.
Right.
Ridley responded unconvincingly. Ridley rubbed the palms of his hands against his blue jeans.
Ew. Grease.
Ianu too.
Said Winnie as she paused long enough for Ridley to get a hint.
Go ahead.
Said Ridley, sounding defeated.
I need new jeans anyway.
As Winnie was bent over wiping her hands on her boyfriend's pants, Ridley noticed she had stopped moving. She also had not further mocked his jeans after he had selflessly presented her with first-class seats to a play of potential insults.
You done down there? Unless...
Slowly, Winnie began to raise up. Ridley, turning his head first, then his body, gulped as he saw what was causing Winnie's unusually slow return to a standing position. Part 2. In the doorway, under the dimly lit sign that read, Corella Center, was the silhouette of a man.
Hello, children.
The man, thick in shadow, said.
Sorry, sir.
Ridley replied.
I know we're not supposed to be here, sir. Winnie, come on, let's go.
Nonsense, nonsense.
The man said as he took a step forward and out of the doorway, allowing the door to shut behind him.
If not here, then where?
The man with the Hamburg-style hat said. No longer an indiscernible silhouette, his face was partly glowing in a wash of starlight. He wore a pair of small dark glasses with perfectly cylindrical lenses that seemed matte, devoid of reflection. The man's large moon-shaped face was pocked with deep scars and dents that added to the lunar effect. Another step forward. Frozen by both fear and a healthy curiosity, Winnie stood silently with her mouth parted enough that she noticed and closed it shut. Neither Ridley nor Winnie felt able to look at each other for comfort. They felt transfixed, hypnotized.
It's quite cold out here. Wherever it is, you would claim this is.
The man said, using air quotes. Another step,
Yes.
Ridley said with all the alacrity of an automaton.
Really, it isn't what you think it is.
Said the pale man.
None of this. We are all so stuck in our poverty of thought, unequipped to deal, nay, tolerate the truth. You have certainly stumbled into a gift. The question is, what is the present? What is your past? And what really is your future? One might say every day is another gift, unwrapped by the present.
Another step. He was upon them. They could not move. It was at this point that they realized they were truly paralyzed by an unseen force. A loud clanking sound broke the intensity of the moment as the flashlight in Winnie's hands clapped against the concrete, then rolled in a half circle before finally coming to rest.
My dear, your eyes are leaking like a sieve,
Said the man as he reached inside his breast pocket and produced a large red handkerchief. His voice, unlike his appearance, was warm and soft and hummed in Winnie's ear like an invitation to the mind. Wiping away her tears, he continued,
There. It really isn't so bad, is it? I'm not so bad. Am I?
Incapable of responding, Ridley knew that they were more than hypnotized, more than paralyzed, for he had lost control in another way and felt a warm and wet sensation running down the contours of his cold legs, after which he began to itch so badly that his skin stung like the biting of 1,000 ants. Whoever or whatever this man claimed to be, they knew that he was worse than all the nightmares strangled together in one choke, worse than any amalgamation the mind conjures in even the most dreadful situation. A thing worse than the devil himself had accosted them this night, binding them in the depths of their bowels. The tall man was gaunt, but round in a most unappealing way. He wore a black suit, which was stretched to capacity around his midriff. His arms were slight where one would expect them to be broad, and short and long where they ought to be the opposite. Ridley thought the man looked oddly frail for someone boasting such a confidence in their idiosyncratic mannerisms. Below his cuff extended barbed fingers that twitched convulsively, perhaps in anticipation. Beyond the terrifying appearance was a most dreadful aroma, a bouquet of death. Winnie wasn't sure if her eyes cried out from the pain of the foul odor or fear.
The simple-minded are simply blinded.
The man in the dark suit said.
You see, this world doesn't belong to you. It never did. So anchored are you in the past, and so reluctantly you rely completely on the present that you don't understand what controls your future.
Turning around and stepping toward the Corella Center door, he continued,
However, children, we do.
and snapped his fingers. This produced a loud pop, and in both Ridley and Winnie's minds, a kaleidoscope of black and white geometrical shapes flashed. The two teens were grabbed by something strong from behind and pushed forward by two thick, strong hands around their necks, presumably from one body. Unable to move by their own will, both Ridley and Winnie were experiencing gradients of fear coursing through them as they had never felt before. Once inside, a long corridor led them past a series of rooms with numbers and letters that appeared random. Screams in the distance grew louder with each step. There was a mild stench of rot underneath a trace scent of clinical camouflage. Idiomatic, like bleach covering blood,
Don't mind the shouting, children.
the man said, looking over his shoulder.
It's just people, like you, crying out for their little lives.
And with another snap of his delicate but menacing fingers, all fell silent, except the echo of that pop which looped in their minds like a fading staccato.
From now on, you will hear my voice and only my voice.
The smooth, suggestive voice said in their minds. It wasn't that he had made the ambient sounds of screaming cease to exist, Ridley realized. It was that he had silenced their ability to hear. All but his voice, that is. Winnie, too, understood they had been made selectively deaf. She also discovered that they had been silenced, for she was struggling within herself to scream. She wasn't trying to scream because of the terror, though that was enough. She had been trying to scream because of the severe pain now inflicting her. When the strange man had snapped his fingers and muted their worlds, he did so separately and could speak to each of them alone. To Winnie, he had said,
You will feel pain unlike you have ever experienced, yet you will not have the ability to satisfy the quenching of your pain through auditory means. Instead, you will suffer in silence until your mind can no longer tolerate it, and you will go mad.
Beginning in her fingertips and toes, an astonishing pain slowly drew inward, sending her nerve endings on fire. Unable to convey her pain through screaming was a torture unto itself, but the inability to share her pain with her lover was anathema. The moon-faced man knew that in humans, the sharing of one's pain gave one the strength to overcome it. Winnie quickly reached her pain threshold and felt herself slipping into unconsciousness. Once out, the pain was so severe that the intensity would rip her back into a conscious state. She found herself in an unrelenting cycle of waking and passing out. Ridley could not move, but from his periphery, he could see Winnie shuddering. Initially, he thought perhaps she was convulsing because she was cold, but her movements became more and more erratic. And then she stopped.
You son of a bitch.
Ridley thought, trying his best to send it telepathically to the dark man.
What the hell are you doing to her?
She's sleeping now,
The man said.
She was in so much pain, but if you like, I can bring her back into it, free of charge.
With a simple nod from the man, Winnie began shaking again. Like a prisoner in an electric chair, her body jolted and rocked. It took less time for her to achieve complete stillness, and she hung like a rag doll, held up only by the hand grasping her neck from behind.
Stop!
Ridley desperately wanted to scream but could only think.
Why? Why are you doing this to us?
Opening the door to the left, the man motioned to enter. Swiftly, the entity behind them ushered them through the doorway and into a red room surrounded by walls that sank below a liquid floor. The four walls appeared reflective, but reflected nothing. The creature placed them both into a kneeling position on the floor, which was wet with liquid. Ridley pleaded with the moon-faced man.
Deal with me like a man. Let Winnie go, please. Only cowards hurt women.
Ah,
Said the tall man.
there it is. You betray yourself. You love her. Of course you do. Well, I can promise you that in just a short time, it won't matter one way or the other.
A secondary floor crested the placid pond and rose up, extending a pathway into the middle. The entity, which up until now had remained unknown, released them and stepped around them, standing in front of them on the main platform. Ridley would have collapsed in fear had he not been tethered to the will of this evil puppeteer. For the moment at least, Winnie was lucky to be unconscious. A large humanoid, being thick with flesh and muscle, stood naked before them. It had no eyes, mouth, or ears, and was devoid of any markings to suggest a gender, except perhaps for the sheer size of it. Its head was bulbous and smooth with tight skin that revealed through its translucent nature something churning inside, something mechanical. The moon-faced man also moved past them and stood near the enormous creature. In contrast, as tall as the man was, he appeared small next to the strange entity.
This is a beta. It is you, it is them, it is us, and it is no one. That reminds me. I haven't yet properly introduced myself, and for that, I apologize,
Said the pale man, as he casually paced between them and the beta.
My name is Allman, and I am here to purge your world, not because man is evil, and not because man is destroying it from within, though it is, but because we can. I am just a small cog operating in the wheel of something much greater. It isn't just your world we are taking. It is what you naively call the universe, bit by bit. You see?
Though Ridley felt weightless, his heart was heavy with worry. Winnie was convulsing again, and she began throwing up.
One day, over time, and very slowly, your world will no longer be yours. It will no longer be recognizable as it is now. We will change everything, just as we have always done. Would you care for an example?
Ridley didn't care what this madman had to say. All he could think of was how to get himself and Winnie out of here and back to safety.
Of course you would,
Said Allman as he turned around toward the red wall at the far end. The wall slowly dissolved into a scene of Nelson Mandela giving a speech.
Inspiration by your courage and conviction.
Ridley was perplexed as to why any of this mattered.
For instance, you may be under the impression that the great leader, Nelson Mandela, died in prison during the 1980s of your Earth time. Most are. We are masters of embellishment and restaging. Your Hollywood is child's play compared to what we endeavor.
The video, which seemed to be old news coverage, then switched to a funeral procession. At the bottom, the date read, December 5th, 2013.
In fact, we have made it so that he died in 2013, the same we have done for both big and small things in your world. You may wake one day to discover your favorite peanut butter is spelled differently, or a good movie you enjoyed now says slightly different things than you believe it used to. You may even discover that your United States has 52 states and not 50, or maybe 70 states. It is up to us. Ridiculous, I know. Quaint. Trust it isn't lost on me, but do listen. It all seems innocuous and irrelevant to change such things, doesn't it? I assure you, it is the most frightening thing you can imagine. Over time, your world will not be recognizable, and eventually, we will even exchange the idea of what is good for evil and evil for good, and your world will fall into chaos, and wars will be started unknowingly in our name. So numerous these wars will be that they will seemingly start themselves. How, you ask? Well, Ridley, as you can see,
Allman said, nodding toward Winnie.
the human mind is fragile, and the subconscious especially. Over time, and with enough pressure, it fractures, and eventually, those fractures produce cracks and valleys. Imagine a puzzle spread across the surface of a table, only with this puzzle, the pieces change shape as you try to piece it together. There is simply no resolution, and your pathetic, tiny brains cannot quantify the paradoxical logic.
With much effort, Allman crouched to be at eye level with Ridley. As he spoke, Ridley saw that his teeth were black and shiny, as if dripping with oil.
Quite difficult to believe, isn't it, Ridley? You see, it is not that we have all the power, it is that you have none. It is what you have mistaken for your reality, which is, in actuality, our reality. It never belonged to you, just as you don't belong to each other.
Allman said, pointing between Winnie and Ridley.
We are the silent listeners. We are the ones patient and observant. You can neither escape us nor find us. We are always too far away to observe or too close to see. We are exacting in purpose and impossible to defeat.
Allman stood and seemed to wince in pain. In a broken walk, he approached Winnie and opted to bend down at the hip. He was quiet for a moment. With one hand resting on his back, he used the other to grab her hair by the roots and pulled upward.
I really do apologize about this, Ridley, but I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to let you go. That's right. I'm sending you off, back to your world.
Allman said, clutching the air with finger quotes.
Go. Please try to save your precious girlfriend,
He said, releasing Winnie's head as it fell lifeless and hung awkwardly.
I will prove to you that what I am telling you is the truth, the real truth. Why am I doing this? It's rather simple, really.
Pausing, Allman considered his words. Through clenched teeth, Allman said,
Strong. You are so strong-minded, strong in will, too. You happen to be a small but persistent percentage of the population who, for reasons unknown to us, are unaffected by our processes. You are one of the few of your kind who notice when we alter your world. We can't have that. Your girlfriend here, sadly, is not like you and is circumstantial collateral. Sorry about that. It's not all bad, Ridley. I am offering you the truth, and I'm offering you the ignorance of that truth. You will go back into your world, and when you discover the terrifying reality for yourself, I promise that you will beg for us to seal your mind shut, to blind you from the torment of your existence. Winnie is lost. Forget about her. It's not your fault,
said Allman.
Ridley, I promise you there is nothing you can do to save her. However, I will offer you the chance to do just that. I will grant you 3 hours to, by any means possible at your disposal, save your little girlfriend here. I know you will try harder than anything you have ever worked at, but in the end it always comes down to one simple thing: the bliss of ignorance. They all want it. When you are exhausted and tired and depressed and finally convinced that your life is pointless, you will come back, begging us to change you. You will, by that time, welcome us with open arms. You will willingly wish to forget all that you love and cherish and live out your days happily ignorant of the knowledge of us and what we do. And if you do not accept these terms,
Allman said, pausing for a moment as he adjusted his hat,
we will come for you with an altogether different intention. Day or night, it matters not when we come. No one will know, No one will remember. No one will care.
Ridley noticed his strength beginning to return, and the ability he first chose to utilize was his mouth.
Please, let her go.
Ridley mumbled with gossamer webs of saliva stretching down his chin.
I will do whatever you say. Just let her go.
Belligerently, Ridley came to a stand. His body was painfully tingling as blood and nerves sparked back to life. Ignoring Ridley's request, Allman turned away from Ridley and said,
Well, what are you waiting for? Run.
and so run he did. Down the hall, Ridley ran past the windowless doors as screams escaped from within. Ridley braced himself as he slammed the entrance door from which he came. His eyes bleary with tears, Ridley slipped on something and met the ground hard without the protection of anticipation. The vigor of his youth failed him, and Ridley screamed in agony. Sitting up, Ridley attempted to soothe the pain away by rubbing his ankle. A flashlight rolled out from under him and stopped at his shoe. A sense of irony failed to impact him as he stared at the guilty object. It was early morning according to the sun, which hung in the sky just above the White Hook Mountains. Any typical morning, it would have been quite a beautiful scene to take in, but it all seemed quite dreadful without Winnie at his side. Getting up, he tried to run, but his ankle could take no weight. He tried desperately to fight through the pain, but was at last reduced to a slow hobble. There was a pain far worse than his ankle surging through him, an incurable pain, an ache that slumbered deep in his heavy heart. He realized that if he didn't fix this suffering might never leave him. Ridley crossed the bridge of the train station to the other side. This should have felt good, being back on his side of the world and further away from Allman. But with each painful step he took, he was also distancing himself from Winnie. Ridley didn't have much time. Going to the sheriff seemed like a good idea, but who would believe him? Her brother, a deputy at the station, hated Ridley and would think it was a prank. It usually was. Her friends would not believe him either. Beyond the wolf crying to a crowd of rabbits, there was simply not enough time to get there and convince. Before he realized it, his legs had subconsciously chosen for him where he should go. Ridley stood frantically before a red door with a sign that read, "Wipe your feet or back on the street." Ridley slammed his fist against the door. What was he going to say? Ridley looked at his watch. Had it already been 30 minutes? He knocked again, this time harder. A faint voice of a woman inside gave Ridley a sudden pulse of relief, but it quickly vanished. The door opened and stopped with the quarter-inch or so of space allowed by the door's security leash.
Yes?
Said the silhouette of a suspicious woman.
Ms. Reed.
Ridley said 3 times before finding a path for his words.
Miss Reed. It's Winnie. She's in trouble. The train tracks, the rail yard.
Ridley's world came crashing down, if but for just a moment, as the woman shut the door on him. A moment later, a metallic sound accompanied by some rustling, and the door opened once more, wider this time. With the chain unhinged, she kept an arm firmly braced behind her in a poised position.
Someone's in trouble?
The woman responded with threads of confusion woven in her brow.
Winnie, it's Winnie.
Ridley said. The woman looked out to the left and right.
You should call the cops.
Call the cops?
Ridley snapped.
Your daughter's in trouble. She's at the train tracks. A man...
Young man,
The woman interrupted.
I don't have a daughter. I don't know what kind of prank this is. But you better go before I call the cops.
Ridley, feeling almost as if he wasn't making his own decisions, stopped the woman from closing the door and pushed his way through.
What are you doing?
Ridley said as the woman backed herself down the hallway. A little boy no older than 3 that Ridley could not place came running from around the corner and latched onto his mother.
You stay the hell away from us.
The woman said with a viciousness that took Ridley by surprise.
Miss Reed, it's me. I've known Winnie since we were kids. You remember? I've known her since one of us was walking and the other was talking. Remember?
Ridley said. But the woman only looked more bewildered.
You're sick.
The woman said.
Get out of here.
She yelled and took a step toward Ridley. Ridley could not believe what he was hearing. Had he gone to the wrong house somehow and stumbled upon Ms. Reed's doppelganger? It was impossible. He had been here 1,000,000 times, just as he had been to the train station 1,000,000 times, and never saw the Corella Center.
Honey, go call the police.
The woman said to her son.
No, don't. I'll go.
Stepping back through the entryway, Ridley was struck by a gust of wind from the pressure of the door slamming in his face. The sound of a deadbolt clacking rang in Ridley's ears, just like the snap of Allman's fingers. Ridley's mind buzzed, and he felt as though he were watching this from outside himself.
I can't believe this.
He said as he crumbled into a pile of himself on the doorstep. An unpleasant sort of euphoria flooded him.
They've changed it. They've done it.
Sadness overtook him, but soon anger roiled up in him. Maybe he could reason with Allman. He would give himself, or someone else, anything to save Winnie. Anything. He walked back to the train station and powered through the sensation of pain emanating from his throbbing ankle. He barely felt the pain as fresh anxiety, like soaked rags draped over his heart. There were barely 30 minutes left until his deadline. Ms. Reed was his only shot, and it was gone, along with her memory of her daughter. Ridley did not want to live in a world without Winnie. How could he live with himself, knowing she had existed yet would remain only as a fading memory in the receding amnesia of time? There was only one thing to do.
Will it hurt?
Asked Ridley as he stood before Allman in the Red Room.
Oh, quite,
Said Allman as he snapped his fingers. A beta appeared from behind Ridley and turned towards him.
Will I remember her?
Remember whom?
Allman responded. A torrent of tears suffocated his vision as he knelt his head, defeated. The beta grabbed either side of his head, and he became another invisible person screaming from behind a randomly sequenced door in this place. Through his own tormented screams, Ridley realized that the screams they had heard were the shrieks of the strong-minded, as Allman had said. Ridley felt a token of comfort in that knowledge. At least he wasn't the only one. He wasn't the only one who'd given up. There was power in powerlessness. An unbearable pressure tied in around his head. Inside his mind, he saw images of Winnie and their life together evaporating. Each memory, like a photograph, was erased from the lens of his mind. The memories once solidified in emulsion were being rinsed away. Epilogue. 10 years had come and gone, and Ridley awoke to the sound of his alarm. He had set the alarm to the radio instead of the intense beep setting. His hand hovered just above the snooze for several moments longer than was necessary as the song "What a Beautiful World" by Louis Armstrong played.
You gonna make breakfast?
His wife asked, slightly leaning in toward him.
Maybe, if you behave.
Said Ridley as he kissed her on the cheek. Ridley got out of bed and let the song continue. No longer did Ridley notice the changes being made by the silent listeners. Memories accountable to his relationship with Winnie had vanished, and along with it, the sadness of loss. He was no longer at war against his own heart. He had accepted Allman's terms in order that he might live in the perception of normality. The pain of losing Winnie was too great a thing to ask of a soul so devoted. If there were a picture for him to rub between his fingers in search of memories, perhaps things could be turned. But no such picture exists. He no longer remembered Allman or that fateful day either. Ridley walked over to the window in his bedroom and paused. Longingly, he bowed his head and breathed in deeply before slashing the curtains open. A red-orange hue blessed the room in a wash of color. He nodded and smiled. Birds pecked and leaves shuddered in the soft breeze. Large, puffy clouds soaked in color, painted by the red sun, hung silently in the sky. Ridley began whistling along to the song as he wondered why the sky was red on Earth, and not blue or even plaid for that matter. Why trees had the ability to sing like birds, and why humans only had 3 fingers and not 6 or 7. Ridley smiled to himself and decided that was a question for scientists. Everything was just as it should be, the same as it had always been.
Silent, the listeners. I wrote Silent the Listeners because I became afraid of what happens when something important disappears, and the world doesn't seem to notice. After my mother died, life didn't fall apart the way people expect it to. There was no dramatic collapse. Work continued, conversations happened, days filled up. But something central was gone, and instead of bringing people closer, that loss quietly exposed fractures. My family didn't come together. Some relationships thinned. Memories conflicted. The past didn't feel as stable as it once had. I started paying attention to how dependent we are on shared memory, how much of our identity exists because other people remember us, confirm us, reflect us back to ourselves. When that structure weakens, something unsettling happens. Reality still looks the same, but it doesn't feel the same. And there's no clear language for that kind of shift. Silent. The listeners grew out of that feeling. The bones of the story also rely heavily on the Mandela effect phenomenon that is so popular these days. The story isn't autobiographical, but the emotional core is. Ridley's nightmare isn't just that Winnie is taken. It's that she is taken in a way the world refuses to acknowledge. Her mother doesn't remember her. Her life leaves no trace. Even the idea that she ever existed begins to collapse. That was the center of the story for me. Not the violence, but the erasure. Loving someone and slowly realizing you are becoming the only person who knows they were ever here. Allman and the listeners aren't meant to be monsters in a traditional sense. They don't conquer openly. They alter quietly. They don't destroy the world. They adjust it. Small changes, soft changes, things that are easy to dismiss at first. The kind of changes that isolate people inside their own memories. That approach felt closer to how real psychological damage works. The world doesn't stop when something devastating happens. It keeps functioning. Meanwhile, your internal world has shifted in a way no one else can fully see. That disconnect between public normalcy and private upheaval is what interested me most. Ridley's final choice came from that place. I didn't want a heroic ending. I didn't want him to defeat anything. I wanted him to face a more human decision. Live with the truth and lose everything that gives his life meaning, or let go of the truth so he can continue living. His surrender isn't framed as weakness. It's framed as the consequence of loving someone deeply and being unable to survive in a world where that love has been erased. The ending mattered a great deal to me. Ridley waking up years later, living a normal life, unaware of what has been removed from him, felt more honest than resolution. People often go on. They build new lives. They smile. They make breakfast. That doesn't mean nothing was lost. It means the mind found a way to carry on. I'm drawn to psychological and cosmic horror because they allow writers to explore those kinds of experiences without reducing them to a hard explanation. They create space to examine memory, perception, and control. What shapes us, and what creates the core of who we are and what we believe. Furthermore, what are we willing to believe? The central questions behind this story were simple. What happens when memory can't be trusted? Who are we if no one else remembers who we were? Is it better to live with a painful truth or without it? Those questions sit underneath every scene. I work as both a visual artist and a writer, and much of my work circles similar ground. Isolation, observation, the feeling of being out of step with one's surroundings. Writing allows me to explore those experiences in a direct way. It lets me build situations where internal fears become external problems, and emotional realities can be tested rather than explained. I wrote Silent the Listeners to explore the fear that something precious can disappear without proof, without witnesses, without permission. The fear that one day you might be carrying a truth that no longer exists anywhere but inside you. If the story works, I hope it unsettles readers quietly. I hope it makes them think about how much of their life depends on memory being stable, shared, and supported. And I hope it leaves them with a lingering question about what they would choose if those things were taken away. I didn't write this story to shock people. I wrote it because I wanted to understand what it feels like when the world moves on and something in you can't. Thank you. G.E.N. Perlin.
The end. We hope you've enjoyed this production of
Dark of the Gray. Made with Spoken.
Professional audiobooks in a click. Spoken.